Welcome to the meeting with referees for First Tech Challenge teams in British Columbia. Today, we're going to be talking about some of the common penalties and situations that we saw in the scrimmages in November and helping teams understand what the rules are for their upcoming qualifiers in January. And with that, I will turn it over to the referee team. Kyle in Vancouver, Dorian and Kath are both here in Victoria.
Thanks, Christine. Hi, everyone. Welcome. Yeah, I'd just like to talk about some of the things we saw at the scrimmages earlier this year and try to make sure everybody knows what they need to know going into qualifiers. So first of all, let's start at the beginning with inspections. We allowed some things
Kyle?
Yes?
Sorry, could we start by just reminding everybody the dates of the qualifiers?
Absolutely. So the qualifiers are, we've got the remote event running from the 19th to 25th, and then on January 28th, we have qualifiers in both Vancouver and Victoria in person. All right, now yes. Okay, so first of all, at the scrimmages, we saw quite a few robots with issues like being slightly oversized or having wiring that had some entanglement risk. Things that were minor enough issues that we let them slide for a scrimmage, but we are going to be stricter about that sort of thing for qualifiers. So I would really encourage teams to go through the self-inspection checklist and make sure you are all good to go before you come to the event, so you're not madly trying to fix things on the morning of the event day. Also, beacons. This is another case where some things at scrimmages are not going to fly at qualifiers. Things like plastic cups and similar items, the Q&A has ruled are too similar to cones, that teams need to be making a distinctive beacon item. There's also been some interesting discussion about what people are calling fin beacons, small loops that sit over a cone and just have a thin extension to meet the maximum size limit. So while those are legal, keep in mind that it's important that both the other teams and the referees can clearly see that your beacon is on a junction. So if you're considering a strategy like that, I encourage you to think about how you're going to make it visible. As far as things we saw in matches, one of the most significant areas I want to highlight where we saw a lot of issues is around the human players and the substations. So it's really important that there's at most one of a robot or a human player in the substation at a time. Those should not be encountering each other. This is a safety thing, so we are going to be strict about this. So make sure that that all the drivers and the human players are responsible for paying attention to who's in the substation and whether they can be entering it themselves. So make sure you are coordinating well with your team and your partner and your human players to handle that well. Also keep in mind that human players are allowed to place a cone into the substation. They are not allowed to adjust cones already in the substation. Once you've let go of it, that is where it is and you are done. So yeah, this is definitely an area, certainly a hotspot for rules issues that we will be watching closely at qualifiers. So please pay attention to it as well. I also want to mention the ground junctions. These are another area where we saw some significant penalties in qualifiers for descoring and similar things. So keep in mind that, there's substantial penalties for descoring and especially for anything that looks like deliberately, strategically taking penalties. That is not something we want to see. Though removing an unscored cone that's not fully sitting within the junction is allowed if it's in your way. That leads into junction scoring interference. Keep in mind that cylindrical protected area extending up from the junction base. If another robot is in that area as part of a scoring attempt, you should not be interfering with them. I should also mention that it may well be strategically a better decision to just let them do their thing and then drop your own cone on top of it. You don't need to race them for the junction. You may well want to not do that. That is another one where I would encourage teams, if you are interacting with another robot at a junction, do your best to make it clear what your intent is so that we can call things fairly. It's a lot of that can happen really fast, and we'll just have to call that based on what we see. But if you can, like I said, do your best to make your intent clear, that will help everything go smoothly. I also want to mention, at the Vancouver scrimmage, we had a couple of incidents with robots actually in the opposing substation. That is definitely not a thing you should be doing. Just stay away from there. That is both the safety issues of the human player and the significant interference with the opposing alliance's ability to play the game. That is right out, and please do not do that. Thank you. Kath, Dorian, do you have anything to add?
I don't have anything major to add. We also saw a lot of the human player penalties getting scored in Victoria, a mixture of the moving the cones around the substation, which the human players are not allowed to do, and the robots driving in to the substation while there's the human player reaching in, which I know you mentioned, but those were things we were seeing in Victoria quite a bit. I don't know if it's worth talking as an alliance, saying that the human player has priority or the robots have priority, but that's something you need to figure out as an alliance with whoever is the human player, whichever team that's coming from. And that might change match to match, but it's not something there's nothing in the rules saying either robots or the human player has priority. So it's just that they both can't be in the substation at the same time.
I think maybe just quickly expanding on one of the earlier things you mentioned about the wiring and the building of the robot. I saw a few teams have their batteries mounted external to their robot. So maybe having a bit of intention with that. There was actually like a couple teams. So just like finding a good spot or protecting it because we don't want those damaged.
Yes, very good point, Dorian. Batteries are not bumpers. These batteries burst into flames if they get punctured. Please do not cause that to happen.
I would also encourage power switches not to be externally mounted. They need to be accessible. Yes. They need to be labeled, but not on the outside of your robot. And yes, I have seen robots that drive into the wall and turn themselves off. That's probably, I'm sure our refs can continue talking about stuff amongst themselves, but we'd like to open it up for questions as well. You're welcome to unmute and ask questions or post them in the chat and I can read them out for the referees. If your teams have any questions about the rules, or if you've seen something you didn't understand, you are welcome to let us know. I should have said that at the beginning because then we might have some questions waiting in the chat already.
One question that I have is that if a team put a cone into the terminal and to score the terminal points, right? But at the end game, if the alliance robot trying to park at the same terminal and accidentally touched the corn inside is already scored inside of the terminal, is that void the scoring elements?
Yes, scoring elements in contact with a matching color robot do not count. So that is definitely something to be careful with.
And also will void the circle if they already built it.
Yeah, everything will be scored as if that scoring element was not present.
Okay, cool. Thank you very much.
There's another piece of that in that you don't want to block the refs from being able to see the cone in the terminal if your robot is going to park in the terminal. The refs will possibly walk around the field if they think there might be a cone in a terminal that they haven't seen. But if they literally can't see it, they can't score what they can't see.
I'm just a reminder with this is that the parking just needs to be in, which means breaking the plane of the space, which is that tape line, and being in enough that the refs can see it, but you don't need to fully take up the entire corner.
Thank you.
I wanted to ask, is there like a specific way to place the tone in the terminal, or the tone can be like placed any time? Like, does it have to be like upside down or like something when you place it in the terminals?
In the terminals, I don't believe, Kyle, if you got it up, it might be worth checking. I don't believe they need to be upright. I think they can be on their side in the terminals. If they're on the junctions, they need to be upright. And so this map that's on the screen might be helpful. The terminals are only the scoring areas in the corners of the field, and there's only 2 per an alliance, whereas the junctions is the middle area.
Yeah, that's right, Kath. I've confirmed to score for the terminal points, cones just have to be in the terminal. Same deal as the robot, they just have to break the plane in any orientation.
Okay, thank you for that. Can the beacons be like not a tone but a cylinder shape? Like they're not like cone type, but they're like cylinder.
I think a cylinder is fine as long as it meets the minimum size requirements.
Yeah,
It
Yeah,
honestly would be
obviously.
easier if they're not cones. Like it's best if they're not looking like the cones.
Yeah.
For sure. Yeah, that would ultimately be, the inspectors would have to look at the specific item, but I don't see anything wrong with a cylinder in concept.
Like I team has something like the chess bishop. Do you think that will count as a beacon? I know.
What type of spaceship?
Like a bishop, you know, in the chess.
Oh, bishop.
Okay.
Like a hollow, like the outside is okay.
Yeah.
I think as long as it fits within the sizing cube, is it made out of? Is it 3D printed or?
Yeah, it's 3D printed.
Does it? Do you mind me asking what color it is, or did?
It's orange.
Okay, I think that should be fine. No.
So keep in mind that you need a beacon whose primary color is the color of your alliance. If that sounds like it would be fine if you had a red and a blue one, but a primarily orange beacon is not going to work for anything.
So we need a beacon that is primarily blue or red.
That's right.
So you'll need to bring two.
You need to bring both of those to the tournament and use the right one for the color you're on in the match.
Yeah.
But the shaping of a bishop, as long as it fits within the sizing cube requirements for the beacon, sounds really cool to look.
Yeah.
Thank you for that.
If a team that not sure is there a beacon it's legal or not, who we should send a picture to before the qualifier? Is there a way that we can verify that?
We can recreate the question box system from last year, where teams can ask questions, and it doesn't have to be just referees, it can be other questions. And
Yep.
I will send that link out in the next FTC BC newsletter. And so you can submit questions. If it's referees, I'll send them on to Kyle. If it's technical, we'll get some of our technically skilled alumni to respond to the team and help them with whatever the question is.
If you're serious about getting answers about the shape of a beacon, I recommend putting a ruler in the photo because the size of a beacon does matter quite a bit.
And also any ruling that you get based on a picture means that they will be saying, this looks good in the photo, but we will make the final determine in person at the event.
I have another question regarding to the beacon. Does it mean that our beacon cannot be a cone shape, or because what's the boundary of it's?
Yes, Kevin, your team was one of the ones that we should not have passed at the scrimmage.
Yeah, I know, but what's the boundary between that the beacon we provide? It's a corn shape is or too similar to corn, or how much distinguished that we need to be?
That is a good question. I'm not sure there's a hard boundary that can be drawn yet. What I know is there's the beacon. Let's see, just a moment.
To say what's been described as not being allowed, because like I remember being said that like they can't be cones themselves and they can't be cups
Yes.
with holes at the
Okay.
top.
The other thing is just to add something that makes your cone very like, even if you're using the inside of it could be a cone, but you could put something around it on the outside that makes it clearly not a cone.
Yeah.
Like a cup with pom-poms glued on.
That works.
Yeah.
Just make sure the pom-poms don't fall off.
Yes.
That might not have been a good idea to dream up, but yeah.
So just for example, that if I using a paper cup and I remove the button and if I like for example I glue something outside of the cup, right? Make it not looks like a cup, or at least it's not the same original shape of the cup. Is that okay?
Well, if you do it, that's a different set of issues. But if your team members do that, that sounds fine.
I'm just, I don't know. My team may come from some ideas.
I think
Yeah.
the premise behind what this rule is trying to intend here is when the referees are scoring, if it becomes challenging to differentiate, that's not what we're hoping for. So don't try to make it look like a cone for sure.
Mm-hmm. Got it.
I also want to ask if on the ground junction we place the beaten, right? And if a team plays the beaten, the other teams cannot store, right?
That's right.
So if the other team like made that beaten though out of the ground junction, then they store on it, or are they not allowed to store in that junction?
So if the beacon ends up off the junction, it's allowed to be scored on again, but there would be enough penalties handed out for that it wouldn't be worth it.
How much penalties do you get for each start?
It depends.
That's very situational dependent.
Yeah.
But it would certainly be significantly more than whatever a team could then score or get a circuit as a result of, because it could also be interpreted as deliberately descoring, which brings in a whole other raft of penalties. So it really depends on the situation. And I doubt the refs want to be pinned down on exactly the number, but Kyle very clearly said it would not be worth it.
Yeah. At a minimum, you'd be getting the major penalty for descoring a beacon from a junction. There might also well be another major for controlling an opposing alliance as a beacon, or as Christine said, the deliberately taking penalties. Yeah, there's a lot of things that might come into play in that situation.
Yeah.
But at a rough guess, a typical example of that would probably be looking at somewhere around 60 points of penalties at least.
Yeah. That's a lot. Yeah.
Yeah, so don't do that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, we'll just give it one more minute and see if anybody has any final questions.
For the advancement to provincials, is there like something that the teams have to like qualify in matches or something? Like, do they have to rank a specific place to qualify for provincials?
So if you look in Game Manual Part 1, there is an advancement criteria. And so it starts at the top with the first place Inspire winner. Then it goes to the captain of the winning alliance, second place Inspire, the first pick on the winning alliance, third place Inspire, first pick of the finalist alliance, sorry, the captain of the finalist alliance, the Think Award winner, first pick of the finalist alliance, the Connect winner. There is a whole actual criteria that lists the advancement criteria, and it will be based on the number of teams at the event. A certain percentage of them will advance. We are not announcing that exactly. I am expecting the Vancouver qualifier to have around 20 teams, and likely about 50 to 60% of them will advance. We need to have a final number of teams in each event before we can give you an exact number for each event. And because some teams have only been registering in the during the month of November, we still have a little bit of shuffling going on about which teams will be at which event and the exact advancement numbers from each event.
Okay. So the qualified matches are not like the only thing that you should be focused on. It's also about the awards you should win.
Definitely at least half of the teams will advance based on the awards. The qualifying matches, I don't know that I'm just trying to think based on the advancement criteria. I'm not sure if even the top ranked robot, if they lost out in the elimination matches, they might not advance just based on being a high scoring robot during qualifiers. So you definitely should be thinking about awards, yes.
So that involves also being ready for your interview with the judges and preparing, I'm assuming it's still called the engineering portfolio.
Yeah.
So the judges can get a summary of what your team has done this year. And being ready for alliance selection, which will be something that's happening at qualifiers that didn't happen at the scrimmages. So read up in the game manuals about how that process works, but also be talking with teams about which who wants to be on alliances together.
Thank you for that.
So can I confirm that the January 28th, the qualifier is the LA Matheson, that's now confirmed?
Yes.
Okay.
As far as I know anyway. Sorry. I mean, there is always the possibility of some weird thing happening at the school the week before and like the gym floor starts peeling up or some weird thing. But we we are completely planning, and it is confirmed as far as both us at the school and the school board. As far as we know, everything's confirmed.
Okay, understood. Thank you.
I'm just trying to very quickly get the reference for where in game manual part 1 is the advancement criteria. Unless anybody else happens to know it.
Probably the T rules.
No, I wanted to know which chapter. Chapter 6 is eligibility for advancement, and 6.2 is where you'll find the specific list of the order of teams that advance.
Thank you for that. I will check that out.
Okay. Okay, last chance for anyone who has a question. I want to thank all our coaches. I see a number of them have come today, which is great. It is wonderful that you put your time in and support your teams. So thank you for all that you do. And specifically, I want to thank our referee team. They spend a lot of their own time reading these rules and understanding what goes on. And we could not run these matches without them. So definitely big thanks to our ref team. And with that, I think we will wrap up today's meeting. And I wish you guys all happy holidays. We will see you at events